I came to UMBC before I was ever working here back in '72 to put leaflets on cars, and it was a very sparse university at the time. I think there were 2 or 3 buildings and a big parking lot, and that was about it. I had no idea at the time that many years later I'd actually be working here. I came here in 1989, early 1989, after working in industry for 16 years, mostly in materials science and electronics. But when I came here, I was hired specifically to work in the TRC building, which is off campus. And except for maybe 2 of the 30-plus years I've been here, I've been in the TRC building. Once upon a time, the TRC building was actually a kind of a prison for juveniles. And when I was hired there in '89, it was still pretty rough. I mean, a lot of reconstruction hadn't taken place. Many rooms were turned into laboratories, and I assisted with that. A lot of things needed to be repaired. I assisted with that. And as laboratory functions went on, the building went through a transformation over the years. One of the things I experienced that left an impact on me, an emotional impact on me, occurred in the early years at TRC. Probably, I'd have to say maybe 1995, 1998, somewhere in there. I can't remember clearly now, but at the time, the administrative assistant in the building was Mrs. Lynn Randers. And Lynn would call me from time to time when things didn't seem right, if something was out of place or if there was a noxious smell in the building or whatever, or lights flickering or whatever. I was the one, the go-to person, see what this is all about. One day she called and she said, in the basement at TRC, she said, there's a young woman sitting cross-legged on the floor and a tall man in a 3-piece suit standing over her, writing something. And I mean, from what she described, I could deduce they didn't belong in the TRC building because the basement at the time was undeveloped. So, I mean, it still pretty much looked like the prison that it used to be. So I went downstairs and introduced myself to the gentleman in the 3-piece suit and asked him, this is a private research facility. Why are you here? And he explained to me that he was the young woman sitting cross-legged on the floor was, I guess she was probably in her 30s at the time. She had been an inmate here at TRC. And the gentleman in the 3-piece suit was her psychiatrist. And they had to return to TRC to help her battle some of her demons related to why she had been there in the first place. So that's probably the most impactful thing that ever happened to me because I will never, ever forget that. TRC was, at one point in time, probably an awful place. But then it made that transition from, a prison to a dazzling research facility. Reflecting back on the history, for example, when before the renovations of the first floor, the basement area took place, all the original cells were intact. And many of the kids that were kept there were surprisingly artistic. Well, I remember one in particular where someone had done a pencil drawing on the door. The doors were all metal, and they were locked from the outside. And once you were locked in those rooms, you weren't getting out. But someone had done a fantastic pencil drawing of a plant leaf with all the detail and all the veins and all the. It was every time I would go into the basement, I'd make a point of going over and looking at this thing, because it was like, even though there were people detained here that, for lack of a better term, were social misfits, many of them were very talented. Good communication is important. That's always important. People need to remain allied through good communication and talking about problems. And I can see as time goes on, probably many things need to be discussed, and I think that'll be an important facet of cultural progress at UMBC, open lines of communication.